Welcome back to another installment of Make Shingo Great Again. As you can see, we've got no suspension. Don't know if you can actually see that, but she gone. I pulled out the struts and the rear shocks. As I've said in previous videos, this car is on 4 Coney yellows. Those are the rears. And these are the fronts. They are in the insert style, the style you gotta cut the old shock apart and make those. Anyways, the reason I pulled these out was I want to do some bump stop tuning with this car. So in street class, it is legal to modify your bump stops to a certain extent. You can shorten them and you can change material, but essentially, I forget how they word it, but you can't have them longer than factory. So you can switch the material, whether that be metallic or different types of foam or rubber. You can change stiffnesses, etc., but it has to be the same length when the shock is compressed at first contact. So, I previously had this car lowered, which if you've seen my old videos, you would have known I returned it back to stock or close to stock for H Street. When I did that, I never put a lot of thought into the bump stops. So the car previously had trimmed bump stops in it so that it wasn't always riding around on them when it had the lowering springs. So I never realized how much of a role they play in these cars. These cars almost ride around on the bump stops, or I think they do anyways. We're going to get to that in a minute. So what I've done here is I bought 2 new front bump stops. Those are OEM. You can see the comparison there of the trimmed versus the OEM. So we're going to put these in. And then back here, these are the trimmed rears compared to the factory rears. So I was able to buy the fronts brand new from Honda. They weren't too expensive. I think they were 15 or 20 bucks. But the rears, you can't actually buy from Honda. So the rear shocks on these cars are considered non-serviceable. They have a little sleeve on them that is like pinned on, and you actually have to drill it out to remove that pin, and then you can take the plates off and you can get these bump stops off. So because of that, Honda does not sell the bump stop on its own. So these were just plucked from VTEC Acres out of some spare shocks I still had that were OEM. So they're in good shape, non-trimmed. You'll notice I actually have 4 here. I plan to try a few different bump stop setups in this car. I want to try full length, first of all, because I've been running it on the short and I don't like that. Whereas in my coupe, I've been running full length OEM and the car feels much better than the sedan did. So the plan is to have 2 full lengths, or maybe even 3 full length sets. I still have more in the backyard I can go get, but I'd like to have a fully OEM bump stop. I'd like to make one that's full length but a bit stiffer than factory, and I'd like to try one that's full length but a bit softer than factory. That way I can kind of play around between those 3 and see what I like best. I'm going to do the same thing to the front. I only bought 2, unfortunately. I wish I hadn't. I'm going to order a few more of those so I can do the same thing, have an OEM set, a stiffer set, and a softer set. That way I can play with combinations and see what I end up liking the most. And that may just be OEM, I'm honestly not sure, but you don't know unless you try. And for some reason in street class, I don't see anybody talking about bump stops. And having these shitty ones in the car for a season made me realize how important they might actually be. So I figured it is a tuning aid that we're allowed to do in street class. Why not explore the avenue and see what we can do? Okay, a quick note about the shocks before we start putting some stuff in the car here. I don't think I am going to reuse the front Coney yellows. I have not been happy with these since the day I installed them. When they're on soft setting, they are way under dampened. When you drive the car on the highway, it actually gets like the boat float going. like an 80s or 70s boat, which is whack. If you crank them right up, they feel okay. They feel more like OEM. So I'm not going to run those on the front. The rears, I do like when they're cranked up. They feel great. However, my driver's side one was showing signs of, it's not very much, but it looks like it may have weeped just slightly. I'm probably going to run them as is for now, throw them back in the car, and kind of monitor them. If that one continues to leak, I might just buy one replacement one. But regardless, the fronts are not going in the car. I have this set over here. These are factory for a 2010 SI sedan, which is the same part number that would come factory in my 09. These are actually out of my old 2010 Tafata White FA5, which I don't think I've ever shown on the channel, but I'll throw a picture of it here. Nice thing about these is they don't leak and they're low mileage. They only have about 110,000 kilometers on them. So I actually ended up selling that car to a friend of mine, and he has modified it fairly extensively in his ownership. So he didn't need these factory struts anymore. So he actually just gave them back to me, which was nice. So I'm gonna put those in the front, and I will probably run the springs from that car too, because they do seem like they're in a bit better shape. They are lower mileage, so in theory, maybe they still have a bit more spring than my original ones here, which are starting to get a little bit of rust on them, and they have double and a half, like 2.5 times the mileage on those ones than these ones. So we're gonna go back to the front struts, OEM front struts, brand new bump stops, and these lower mileage springs. We're gonna throw those in the front. I'm reusing my top hats. These have only about 25,000 kilometers on them, and they still feel good. And then out back, we'll run the Coney yellows and the springs that are currently in the car. So I am first going to assemble this thing without any bellows or rear boots. I want to put it together without any of that stuff on it, with the factory bump stops untouched, and I want to basically let the car sit down at ride height, and I want to measure how much up travel we have before we make contact with the bump, front and back, just to get an idea of how close we actually are running on the bump stops. But barring that, I'll kind of guesstimate what I want to do for tuning from there. The other things we got going here, there's a few things on the bench, suspension related. I might as well go over it right now while we're looking. So I have a brand new set of OEM C-stamped arms. This car is an 09, so it does have C-stamped arms in it, but they got 250,000 Ks on them. They're not like blown out or anything, but they're old and a little rough, so I thought, let's try and maximize our tolerance, throw a new set of arms in it. We've also got back here a new Progress 22mm rear sway bar, and mount shackles and everything for that is there. I did run a 22mm in this car for half a season, but I robbed it for the FG2, which is why I bought a new one. So that's that. But this time, instead of just buying the Moog or replacement endlinks, I ended up buying a set of blocks endlinks. I think these are actually for like a Golden Era Civic or Integra, EG/EK kind of thing. They're spherical and they're adjustable length. I think I can make these work, shouldn't be an issue. So if those will work, which I'm pretty sure they will, that will give me the ability to be able to tune out any preload the sway bar might have. So static with no weight in the car, it might not have preload, but once you get a driver, it's going to sync on that side of the car and it's going to bind up your bar a bit. So ideally, I'll have someone sit in the car for me with the same amount of fuel I'll race it at, and then I will get in there and I'll adjust those end links so that that bar has no preload when it's in exact race trim, is kind of the idea there. And then The car needs inner and outer tie rods, so that's what we got here. Those are both inners and those are both outers, so we'll be replacing those. And some things I don't have with me yet, but ideally I'm thinking I should probably replace these big control arm bushings here on the front, and maybe even potentially the lower ball joints. Again, I don't think they're trashed or anything, but just the age of the car, I'm sure they're getting a little tired, and I'm trying to maximize this car as much as possible. So we might end up getting those later, but for now I just want to do a mock-up without the boots, with the stock bumps, and just kind of do some measuring and some looking and see where it's sitting. So I'm not going to bore you guys with assembling this. We'll just go like this, and when I see you again, we'll have shocks in the car. Just want to make note of something quick for some of the 810 or 910 H Street guys that may not know. Your factory bolt hole here is actually a little on the large side for your top hat studs. So when you are getting your alignment done, see that? You can move that. There actually is that little bit of play there. So if you're trying to maximize your street cost and alignment, don't forget to loosen off those nuts. Try and push that strut back as far as you can and then retighten them. It might gain you that 0.1 extra negative degree of camber and maybe even a little caster. So just thought I'd throw that to you guys quickly here while I'm putting this thing together. Alright, the car is back on its wheels. Springs, shocks, everything's in there, just not the boot cover, so we can see the bump stops. So give you guys a little visual of that right now. This is static weight, so no driver in the car, and the car has half a tank of fuel, which is probably a little more than I would normally race it at, but this just gives us kind of a baseline to look. So we can see in there, we've got roughly 1.45 inches as it sits before bump. And up front here, we've got roughly 0.825 inches before bump. It's a little hard to see on the front with the way the spring is, but you can kind of get the idea there, like it's very close to riding on the bump. The front on this corner is basically the same. The anomaly, and I'm not sure if it's because my floor maybe isn't perfect, but this one is nearly 1.8 inches before bump. So that one is quite a ways off. So what I did was I got my girlfriend to sit in the car to simulate race weight, having a driver in there, and I remeasured what the droop was, and basically I marked it all out here, what each corner is to bump. So front left is about half an inch, almost 5/8 of an inch on the right front, 1.2 inches roughly driver's side rear, and still about 1.7 on passenger side rear. So it's quite a bit. On the back anyway, there's quite a big discrepancy there. The front is pretty dang close. So I don't know. I got some brainstorming to do here. Again, this car isn't in exact race trim yet, so like all this could change, and I might try it on a different area of my shop or on a different surface and remeasure it just to see what we're looking at. But basically what I got to do is I decide to trim the bumps to make them an even amount of travel on both sides with a driver in the car. I'm not sure. Do I run different stiffness bump in each corner? I don't know if that would be good. Probably not. I feel like you might get some inconsistency. Then again, if you had a stiffer bump on the driver's side, which is where you'll always have that extra weight, another 170 pounds always on the driver's side with your driver, right? So would it make up? Would it be worth it to have a slightly stiffer bump on that side? I don't know. I got a little bit of research to do and just some thinking, but I mean, at the end of the day, testing is what'll show me what actually works and what doesn't. But as of right now, getting some data so I kind of have an idea of where I'm starting. But it's late. I have to work in the morning, so I'm probably going to call her quits here tonight. This won't be the end of the video for you. I'll pick up the camera next time I start working on it, so see you guys then. Alright, it's another day, and we are back working on the suspension for Shingo. I don't know what I was really thinking last time I talked with you guys. I was talking about maybe trying different lengths on the bump stops, or maybe different stiffness side to side, but I think I was just losing it. So I'm convinced we gotta leave them full length. In some of the research I did last night, it was talking about how your front should touch before your rears, which I mean, that's how it is from stock. So we're gonna leave it with the stock lengths. I'm pretty sure to perform best like that. And for now, I'm gonna leave them at stock stiffness, so that once we put this car together, we'll kind of have a baseline, and then I'm going to make a softer set and a stiffer set that are still full length, and we'll try those out between events and kind of feel out the difference, see what we think. So barring that, we're going to leave the bump stops as they are. I do have to take the shocks back off the front and the back because I need to install the boots for the front, and then these weird cappy boys for the back. So that has to be done. We've got a sway bar still to go on. We've got to try out those fancy dancy endlinks. I won't really be able to dial those until I have someone sitting in the car, so I can play with that, which we may do when we align it. But I figured we could start maybe doing our tie rods. We got inner and outers to do both sides, and then I've also got the C-stand arms to go in too. So when we have the shocks out, these are an easy task to do. Anyway, don't really matter what we do first, it's all gotta be done. So let's do some work. Alright, you guys get the idea. We're putting shocks in. I'm going to fast forward, bang the rest of these out, and then we'll do the fronts. Little tech tip for you. When you need to jack up the rear shock to get your bolt on, because there's not enough room to thread, you only actually have to do it on one side if you have a sway bar. The sway bar is getting tensioned as I lift that side up, which in turn lifts that shock up. So You don't have to move your jack around to both sides. Learn from me. All right, let's bang out these front shocks quick. We gotta just pull them out, throw on the new boots, put them back in. So let's get her done. All right, struts are back in the car. With the boots installed this time, so we won't be damaging our shock shafts. One thing I think I already mentioned to you guys, but I wanted to show you again quick was when you're tightening your top hats down, make sure you stick like a screwdriver or a pry bar in between your top hat and your frame of your car and pry it back and in. There is a slight bit of tolerance in these bolt holes, so you can pry that in and then tighten it. And I don't know, it's hard to notice, but you can see there's a bit of a clean spot next to that stud and nut there. So you can see it does move it in just slightly, and if you do that on both sides, sure, it doesn't seem like much, but in 8th Street, when you're trying to maximize all your tolerances, a little bit here, a little bit there, it all kind of culminates into something that is noticeable. So super easy way to gain a little bit of camber and a little bit of caster, so don't forget to do that when you're installing your crash bolts. Now, speaking of crash bolts, they are installed right now. I have not tightened them. As you can see here, they're in there, but they're loose, so you can see the amount of play you get. I'm gonna throw a little tip at you guys that I use to make sure you get those pulled all the way in when you tighten them down, just to make sure that you're maximizing your tolerance again. So let me grab my special tool and I'll show you guys what I do. That's right, my special tool is a ratchet strap. If you don't have one of these in your shop, I can't help you. So what I do is I wrap this around the strut on the one side, and then I pull it across to the subframe on the opposite side, and then I cinch it right down with the ratchet, and that makes my strut pull in as hard as possible. Like, you know, it cannot get tighter than that. And then I go in there and I over torque those crash bolts to 9,000 because they don't have the oblong camber piece in them like an aftermarket crash bolt, so they have the potential to slip. So you want those things as tight as you can get them. So yeah, let me go throw this on the car. I'll get it all tightened down, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like. And then we'll tighten those crash bolts down. One more quick note I forgot to mention. Some of you may have noticed I have the jack under the spindle and control arm right now. So the reason I do that is I don't jack it right up when I do this, but I take just the weight off of it basically so that there isn't any friction on the bolts. Because if you have the weight of the spindle and the arm and the axle and all that hanging on the bolts, it's harder to push them in, so you might not maximize them. Whereas if you take just that little bit of weight off, there's no friction there and they flop around a lot easier, making it easier to pull it in all the way. So if you're able to do that, also try and do that. Okay, as you can see here, I strapped it to the tow hook on the far side, going under the subframe, and then I go up between the subframe and the control arm, right up to the strut there. Now I can give this a good wiggle. You can see there's no more play in it right now. I haven't tightened the bolts yet, so we know it's pulled all the way in. And hopefully the camera picks it up. You can kind of see the dark spot on the strut there, where the spindle previously sat, and then you can see it's in, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch or whatever with the new crash bolt. So that's that. That's how I do it. I just pull them in as hard as possible with a ratchet strap, and then we'll tighten them down. So I'm gonna bang that out quick. You guys don't need to see me tighten bolts, but I can tell you the ratchet strap will be used as a special tool at least one more time while setting this car up. So look forward to that. I'm thinking next we might move on to, I don't know, we got lots of stuff. We got inner and outer tie rods to do. Still got a sway bar to do. Play with these fancy endlinks, control arms, motor mount. We got lots of stuff to do. So let's move on. In the meantime, I have put the cowl back together on the car. I reinstalled all the trunk liners on the car after tightening the camber bolts. And I figured this type of stuff isn't that exciting. I'm not really doing a how to install these parts. I just kind of want to document that I'm installing them, and any tips and tricks I can kind of throw at you guys for H Street along the way, I will. So I moved on to throwing in the tie rods. I've got the old ones out on just this side. So that's what we're doing next. We're going to reuse the factory boot, still in good shape. And yeah, I'll catch up to you guys when we get to the next task. Inner and outer tie rods are done. Shiny new. Although I'm not convinced that's going to get rid of the clunk in the front end. It's probably the steering rack, like, you know, every 8th gen ever built. It's like they came off the factory with a clunky steering rack. Anyways, out with the old and in with the new here too. So these are our old arms. They are C-stamped, but they've got 250,000 Ks on them. Hopefully these will tighten up the tolerance. I'm a brand new OEM, so we'll swap those in. And then swapping out the old sway bar. I gotta move the brackets onto this bar, and then I gotta fiddle around with end links, like I already said. Try and match them close to those stock ones and throw it all in the car. So I'll get back to you guys once it's in the car. Oh, also, I'm having second thoughts about my rear bump stop. My gut tells me I should just go straight to the stiffer rear bump stop instead of trying the stock. Just because I feel like that's what it wants, but I don't know. I think about it some more. Alright guys, welcome to Under the Car. I just wanted to throw a quick tip at you when you're installing your sway bar. These Progress D-shackles have a slot so that the bar actually has some play in it. You can see there it slides up and down. It'll do that on both sides. So don't just let it hang and tighten it down. It's actually, if you force it up to the top, as high as it'll go, and then tighten it down, that puts your stress point closer to the actual mounting of the chassis, so there'll be less leverage acting upon the main sway bar bracket, so it won't flex as much. So if you tuck it up on both sides as high as possible and then tighten it down, should have a bit of a stiffer mount essentially, and hopefully save your frame from getting torn open. Anywho, I'm going to continue bolting this thing on, and I'll get back to you guys once it's done. Alright, I've got the end links all bolted up. I ended up actually having to do a different combination of the washers from driver's side to passenger side. The bar seems to sit slightly to one side, so the bottom washers are the same on both sides, and on the top I actually ran the thicker washer on the outside, and then on the driver's side of the car I actually ran the thicker washer on the inside. So that managed to make it so that the turnbuckles are in their squarest position possible, so that there hopefully shouldn't be any binding. One issue I'm maybe foreseeing, which I will see once I actually get the car on the ground with some weight on it, your aftermarket end links in this region are rather skinny, so they shouldn't ever foul on here. But with this extra brace from Progress plus the thickness of these arms, I'm worried that this is going to contact right there in that little zone once the suspension travels, and if so, I might have to modify that a little bit, but we'll see. I'm gonna have to get the wheels on the car, get the car on the ground, and start playing with it to find that out, so that'll be our next task. But I could just use a nap right now. I don't really feel like getting up, so you know, getting lazy. Okay, car's back on the wheels. I left the rear upper control arm slightly loose, shock point slightly loose, front lower control arm slightly loose. I'm gonna take it for a drive around a bumpy road and try and let everything settle in before I retighten everything. Also just crawled under with the weight on the car and had a quick look at those end links. It doesn't look like I haven't totally dialed yet. I think I might need to add a couple washers on the bottom to bring them out, because they actually flex the opposite way I thought they would once it was compressed, but I think it'll be okay. I'll just have to tune it a little bit with washers and figure it out. I still haven't set the preload on the bar anyways, so when I do that with a driver in the car, it'll be probably a good time to add those washers easily. So yeah, I'm gonna fire this thing up, take it for a quick drive, make sure everything's hunky-dory, and try and jounce the suspension a bit. So let's get to that. Alright, so I do think it is massively towed out right now, but we're just going for a preliminary drive. I just want to hear if the steering rack clunks or if it was the tie rods, and I want to hear if those rear end links clunk, even though I think I am going to shim those out a little bit. I don't want to feel my new shifter. We'll just go for a cruise around town. It's not hard to find bumpy roads. Oh, I already heard it clunk, so brake pedal feels weird. I don't know why that is. I don't think I touched the brakes. Feel fine now. The first push was weird for some reason. Too clunky, actually. Jeez, there must be a gaggle of 20 people up here on the road, just chilling in the middle of the road. I think it actually is quieter. I'm not getting the loud clunks over bumps, surprisingly. Listen to the back. Not hearing any clunking back there either. And these are pretty bumpy streets. Like I said, I think it'll be better if I shim them slightly farther out than I currently have them to. Feels good. It's definitely different to get used to. The overall height being shorter feels kind of strange, and the shifter's very light, but I'll get used to it. Sure looks nice. The toe is so bad when I drove over the painted lines, I heard the tires go screech. Tires are like screeching just in normal driving. Steering is definitely less clunky than it was. toe definitely needs some serious adjustment, but sounds a little crashy in the back. I don't know if that's just because we're not using the normal style endlinks, we're using the aggressive ones. Something like that. So you can hear the paint squeal. I don't know if the camera picked that up. That is pretty funny. You drive over the crosswalk. I'll undo the window so you can hear it on the next one. Still surprisingly straight. I got that right. I just definitely didn't. I either ran a turn too far, or the new arms are a little different length, or something. I don't know. But I won't drive too much farther here. I just wouldn't mind doing a little bit of a pull and shifting it through these gears slightly. Bad at shifting this car as I'm not used to driving it. It's been a long time, so it's very choppy, but it feels fine. I just have to get used to it. Also, the motor mounts are very worn on this thing, so you can really feel the motor flop, but have a brand new OEM Honda torque mount I'm going to throw in there, and I'm going to check all the other ones, see if one of them's damaged or something, and maybe replace it with a used one I have. Yeah, there's a slight clunk in the back, but that could even be because I do have all the control arm bushings loosened off right now, so that could just be something as simple as that. Yeah, when it clunks in over the edge of the garage here, you can hear a slight clunk, but like I said, I do have a lot of things loosened off, so strong chance that's what that is. Just from that short drive, the inside of the tires are pretty warm. And I can actually smell rubber. Oh yeah, this one's even worse. Yeah. Looks like I got a decent amount of camber though. Might just be because it's towed out. But it looks like I got decent camber. Compared to that one, I don't know. What do you think, Jaggy? Alright guys, I think it's come time that I close out this video. It's kind of been filmed over the last few days as I've had spare time to work on the car, so I don't know how long it's getting, but I just wanted to say, like, kind of go over what we did, which was inner and outer tie rods, which seem to have fixed the front end clunk issue, which is great. We went back to OEM front struts because I haven't been happy with the conies. At the same time we did the struts, we went back to all OEM bump stops because this car had shortened bump stops in it from when it was lowered, which was making it pretty wallowy for H Street, so we're back to stock bump stops. For now, like I said earlier, I may stiffen up the rear bump just a little bit because I have a feeling it might help with rotation, and it also might help with just keeping the car settled. What else did we do? We put a Progress 22 mil sway bar in the car, and we went to spherical adjustable blocks end links. I still need to do a little bit of fine tuning on those, but the goal, or the whole point of installing those, was so that we can dial out any pretension that the sway bar has when you have a driver in the car. So I will dial that off camera probably, but I want to get it lower on fuel, so it's like actually at an amount of fuel that I race the car at, so the weight's really close. And then I'll get my girlfriend to sit in the driver's seat so that it's at race weight, and then we will adjust the preload on the sway bar from there. What else did we do? Oh, the new C-stamp rear control arms. The car already had C-stamps, but we replaced those, just hopefully tighten up tolerances. We tried to maximize our front camber alignment a little more than I previously had. Last time I just threw the bolts in, pushed it in with my hand, tightened everything down. This time I went through more effort to try and push in the top hats as much as possible, and then I really pulled in the bottoms with the ratchet straps. And so, there's a few tips I want to throw at you guys here quickly that I'm not going to have on camera, but I would do if you were trying to set up your 8 Street car. Is loosen off all your suspension control arm pickup points, all that type of stuff, and just take it for a drive like I just did. Drive it over some bumps, get it to settle down as good as you can. The goal there is you're trying to get the bushings to clock at ride height, not at droop. And then when you get back from your drive, get 6 or 5 or how many of your closest friends you can stuff in this car, get them all to sit in it so the thing comes down on the bump stops, and then climb under it and retighten all those suspension points. So that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and get as many people as I can in that thing, get it slammed down, and I'm going to go under it and tighten everything back up. When I do that, I'm going to adjust the toe a little bit closer. Obviously, I'm going to take it for a proper alignment to get the toe dialed, but just so I can drive it there without the tires squealing. And the other thing I wanted to mention that I am going to attempt, I've never done this on this car, but I'm pretty sure it's possible, is your front subframe is attached with 4 bolts that have like a collar on them. And I believe there's a bit of tolerance in each of those bolts to the point where the subframe could slide around. So allowing in factory tolerances, what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen all 4 of those bolts off just slightly. I'm going to anchor the car down, and then I'm going to put my ratchet straps on that front subframe, attach it to something else solid, and pull it forward and pull it tight against those bolts, get the subframe as far forward as possible, and then retighten it down. And basically what that's going to do is hopefully give us more front caster, which will hopefully give us better tire wear is the goal there. So thought I'd mention that to you guys. I may or may not show that on camera. I've never attempted it, but I think it should work. Anyways, I think I babbled enough. This concludes the suspension episode of Making Shingo Great Again. So if you guys enjoyed it, please leave a like. If you enjoy the content, consider subscribing, and we'll catch you in the next episode of Making Shingo Great Again.